Well, Hugh, I want to take you to 1979 and another Admiral's Cup series for you, but this one was a victorious one in tragic circumstances somewhat, but provided Australia with their second victory in the Admiral's Cup. How was that series for you?
Well, it was pretty exciting, I guess. It was a good international regatta, but it ended up in a terrible thing with death and boats sinking, and it was terrible. But it's one of those things, you never forget it. I can remember details of that experience as clearer than I can remember what I did yesterday.
Well, as Australia got home, all three
Anyway,
boats got home and won the Cup. But now we must talk now about 1983 and the America's Cup victory. Or an integral part of that as tactician aboard Australia too. Quickly, your thoughts on that and the final race, perhaps, which is, everyone can still remember that.
Well, I can remember long periods of time that would take a full day to tell you. It somehow is still in my mind very clearly. It meant so much to us to get it right. We stuffed around with spinnakers to try and get more stability in our sails because we weren't very quick downwind, and we did a lot of tweaking. Not major things, but little things daily. And it's rather weird that I had this wonderful bloke from Kiwi, he was one of the sailmakers. He ended up with being on all the New Zealand successful defenders and winners of the America's Cup. I can't remember his name now.
Tom
Butterworth, I think.
Tom Snackenberg?
No, Butterworth.
Brad
Butterworth, yeah. Right. Snackenberg ran the sail thing, but I got invited to take over the spinnakers and do all the adjustments and select all the things. And Grant and Bertrand and John would work with regard to the crossover, what spinnaker to have on what angle and how much wind speed. And we had to get a graph that we'd virtually have to change daily as we refine it, because if I'd make adjustments to a spinnaker and then test it the next day and make an improvement, it meant shuffling a lot of the other already decisions set in concrete you'd think had to be moved, So we worked hard on that, and with this Kiwi fellow who did all the work, and I just talked to him about what I wanted, and we were ordering the spinnakers daily. And in fact, we were doing it right through the final regatta, including the day before the last race. They'd work at night, we'd just tell them what we wanted to do, and they'd go and do it, and we'd go and have a sleep and go out again the next day, And Grant and I used to have a terrific relationship with a fellow named Tony Mignon, who was a weather forecaster, and you wouldn't believe it, but he was a young bloke he studied meteorology, and he was working with some local weather forecasting people, and he was available for anyone to talk to, any one of the crews, any one of the challenging boats in all the selections. And Grant and I were the only two blokes who spoke to him. They all knew it all. And they didn't, and this bloke was incredible. So this is your forecast, and you say the wind is going to be 220 and it's going to back to 210 at 2 o'clock, or like 2:30 or something, and then go another 5 degrees at 3 o'clock, and go down half a knot and all this stuff. And he was very good at it. And we used him a lot, every day. And as I say, he was the only bloke that, or we were the only two blokes who spoke to him. And he was a real big help. So every sailor knows that you always got to go where the wind is, you know, like if you go where the wind ain't, you're dead. And I was lucky. I was born with a real good set of eyes. I could always see marks a long way before anyone else on the boat could. And why can't you see them? I said, well, it's impossible. We're all looking, we can't see them, but I could. And I'm blessed with a good set of eyes, so another bloke who was really good at this is Phil Smidmore, and he was working at the mast, doing all the halyard work and helping on the grinders in the tacks, but he was a very skillful sailor and a very good reader of wind, and as both trimmers were, and of course Colin Beechel being a starboat sailor, very expert in that regard too. So we could look at wind and see the shift in the wind angle and the wind speed going up and down, very small degrees of pressure we could all see because we got so skilled at it and talked about it a lot. And I fiddled around with the spinnakers, and we found that the rougher it got with the spectators, the more we had to round the spinnakers up and stabilise them. And we also found that we had to use narrower spinnakers. The worse it got with the slop, we had to make smaller sails, and we had to steer the boat to different angles, like higher angles. And anyway, we did that all the way through the selection trials, and started off very slow downwind and ended up very fast downwind. And it kept going through the finals. And
Hugh, I want to take you to the last race of the America's Cup, the second last leg when Australia passed Liberty. Just tell us about how that came about and the thoughts on the boat at the time.
Well, we were a fair way behind at the top mark. I think it was 57 seconds. It's a long way. But the other boat wasn't quite as fast downwind, and we knew there was a chance. But he set a starboard pole, and by the time we got to the buoy, and also set a starboard pole for the run down, because that's where the wind seemed best. About that time, he jibed to port and went over toward the middle of the course. And we had nothing else to do except find wind. And looking back, there was a hell of a lot of smoke coming off the spectator fleet. And because we're going out to the eastern side of the course with a starboard pole, the majority of the spectator fleet were over looking upwind to the right. And there was a big cloud of diesel smoke drifting down the middle of the course. And I could see between the boats, the spectator boats, there was wind out beyond the spectator fleet, and the spectator fleet was huge. And you couldn't look upwind near where the other boat was because you couldn't see through. But out to the left side, looking upwind, and you could see that there was wind on the water out beyond the spectator fleet. So basically we wanted to stay that side of the other other yacht. And when the other yacht jibed and came back toward the middle of the course, we could see that we had gained already, and we just stayed on that jibe. And when we got to the ley line where we had to go back, we jibed and came in, and we weren't very far ahead of him, but sufficiently ahead to carefully steer and place our boat so we could avoid his bad wind. And we had the ability on that boat, we could sail very deep and very slow against another boat with success. We had very stable spinnakers. We worked really hard on stabilising our spinnakers by the shape of them and the trim of them, and really skilled trimmers. We were very confident that we could make this deficit up. And we got close enough in a couple of jibes when we got ahead. There wasn't much in it. At the bottom mark, I think we were 20 seconds ahead. And normally boats go about 5 seconds a boat length. And so we're only about 4 boat lengths clear, or 3 boat lengths clear at the bottom mark. And we had to get our jib up and take our spinnaker down and jibe at the same time, which is quite a trick on those boats without screwing it up. You know, like you had to have perfect coordination between highly skilled crew members to be able to do that. And luckily we did that and did it well. And then we had to just stay between him and the mark. And we came around on port tack, and of course the Liberty tacked off. We tacked onto starboard, and he went over toward the middle of the course a bit, and then backwards and forth, and we were matching him time all the way across. And we would be able to, on port tack, put our wind wake of our sails onto him. And we could do that quite precisely with split judgment of time when to tack to do it. And we got to a point where the other boat, we were gaining and going away from him slightly. And he did something really weird. He tried to do a false tack, like go up into the wind and start letting the jib off the winch as we would naturally follow. But he went up into the wind and started easing the jib, and we did the same, but then he'd fall back onto that same tack and re-trim on, and of course we'd do the same. So it didn't work. And he did that, he turned the wheel from starboard to port to starboard to port, and I couldn't communicate with the steerer what was going on, so I just simply grabbed the wheel looking back at the opposition, and John just let it go and had a look, and I just did that or that with the wheel to match him, so we eventually fell onto port tack again, and he was still in our dirty air, and it was a matter of just keep doing it. And he then took off into a long port tack in toward the spectator fleet, and we were by that time a little bit east of him, which was a bit further off he had clear air down our starboard side, both on port tack. So we had to just wait until either he tacked and we'd tack and go to the finish, or if he kept going into the spectator fleet, we had to just take our judgment to when to bail out and go. And you know, it got to a point where we had to go, and we were in fact a little bit past the ley line, so it was slightly reaching, so it was pretty easy. But it was very necessary to for the crew to remain very calm, which they did. But to start talking about, we're going to win the America's Cup, all this sort of stuff, had to be squashed. Because until you do it, there's a risk, and you have to focus on what you're doing 100% of the time, for 100% of the time, precisely that. And we did. It was simple. It just, I think we won by about 4 boat lengths. A bit more than that. Yeah, about 4 boat lengths. 12 metres, like any other boat. It's weird. All boats go 5 seconds a boat length. All size boats. Like a J24 goes 5 seconds away for a boat length, so does a 12 metre. So does a maxi. We go further because you're a bigger boat, but pretty much they VMG sailing upwind, 5 seconds a boat length for every boat. So we were 4 boat lengths ahead.
A quick question. What do you think of today's America's Cup and the boats that we're racing?
Well, it's much, much different. Like, it's hard to imagine how they can do the judgments they have to do in such split-second timing, and the skill of the steerers, particularly in the close confines. The 2 steerers of the 2 boats in the final was just beautiful to watch, and it always is in that. I remember the time before when they were in Bermuda, and I thought I saw something that New Zealand fellow tactician did that was just absolutely spot on. He tacked onto the last, around the last mark, he bore off, and the steerer steered it, so he just shaved the mark where the other boat shaved it while they were still on the wind, and took a radius around, and of course the Kiwi was in the wake, below the wake of the other yacht, the American yacht, and he had clear air to leeward. In those days they had a thing showing the wake off the rigs, and the little bloke from Melbourne, the tactician, what's his name?
Glenn Ashby.
Glenn. He soaked down to leeward and had clear air around the lee side of the other boat. But the other thing is they went into the last jibe without telling or doing, nobody moved. And they all had to, in their previous manoeuvres, they had to get the grinders to go across this boat so they could jibe, so the pumping and the sails could be adjusted during the turn. But what Glenn Ashby and the skipper did, they turned the boat without letting anyone know, and they'd never done it before, to see how it would go, and it did go. And of course they got their wind wake across the American boat's bow, and they couldn't penetrate the wind wash. And it was just perfect bit of tactician work and sailing work. You know, it was the best thing I've ever seen.
Well, Hughie,
anyway.
We've got to wrap it up now. I thank you very much. It's great to have you here, and your career has been absolutely outstanding, and I think you're a very deserved member of the Hall of Fame for the Cruising Yacht Club. I mean, it's a record that is unsurpassed in Australian yachting. So wonderful to have you here, and keep going well, and maybe there's a few more championships around the corner. Who knows?
Who knows? Anyway, I've had a lot of fun, and I've so had a lot of wonderful people. Terrific.
Yeah, good on you, Hugh.
The best sport in the world.
Indeed.